Hey, today we were talking about chapter 17 and 18. It's just going to be a really quick two chapters where it has some higher level thinking involved in it, but it's mostly about just a really large macro sociology. So most of you probably came here looking for people. This is more like a whole entirety of human history, hopefully summed up in only a few slides, but um, honestly, these chapters don't have as much about the specifics, but more about just the macro, the big stuff. So, look at collective behavior. A crowd is a temporary gathering of people who are close to each other. So, this could be any amount of people. Most crowds are just accidental groups of people, and we're just people passing each other. Um, in some ways, this is like going by each other in the hallways. It's a crowd, a bunch of people. Doesn't mean you know each other, doesn't mean you talk to each other, but you'll see this definitely in the bigger the town, the bigger the amount of crowds you can have. Um, and this is ones that are accidental. So we are not yet talking about like sporting events or anything like that where you all are there for a certain reason. Okay? A mob is a crowd that is trying to commit a particular violent action. So they decide to meet up together and they're going to kill someone. So in the past, and I obviously was not going to include this in your PowerPoint, but you'll have lynch mobs or crowds of people looking to kill black people, and they would hang them from trees, which is what lynching is. Um, I know it was a year or two ago, maybe it was 2017, but there was a 100-year anniversary of a lynching in Omaha, and it is rather scary to see still. It could have been any of our great grandparents or anything like that, but people in Omaha by a light pole, big crowd of people just right there, dead black guy, and just insane stuff. Um, this is different, however, from like a riot, which still is more likely to be the thing that you'll see today and that you've probably seen in your lifetime. A riot is not organized well. It's mostly a bunch of angry people meeting together. Um, and usually those people end up destroying property, so I think you can even see, I'm not sure exactly what that guy's doing, but they're like messing with this car. This guy's a baseball bat, so he's ready to break some stuff. You know, this is America, or probably America because we got the McDonald's in the background. Um, but yeah, they destroy property, and a lot of times they steal from businesses. So people really hate rioters because okay, you're breaking things. Well, sometimes that happens even if you're happy. You'll have sports parades where people will break stuff just because they're insane. But these are the people that are purposely breaking things on purpose just to cause problems. And they will break into stores so they can steal stuff because there's so many rioters that unless the cops were to shoot everybody that was rioting, they're going to get away with it. So you'll find sometimes people will participate in a riot because they see there's so many people committing a crime. I could go steal a TV from the Best Buy and no one's gonna find out. So yeah, that can be a big problem. Not as big of a problem in Nebraska. We usually don't even have big enough towns to have massive riots like that. But it doesn't mean there hasn't been stuff like that before. Okay. Relative deprivation theory. A theory in which anybody is deprived of their basic needs, they can become angry or lose hope. And when people get angry or have nothing to lose, they will rebel. Sometimes violently, but many times it can also be peaceful. So for a peaceful way, yeah, like the civil rights movement. Now you would have some groups like the Black Panther organization, which doesn't have anything to do with the Marvel Black Panther. It's just actually a coincidence. But the Black Panther organization believed in having guns on them all the time, and that if a white person or a cop questioned you or was being racist, that hey, you could just shoot them because they're not going to be able to be as racist if they're not around anymore. Completely different from like the Martin Luther King civil rights movement. However, usually you get protests and movements. You can get rid of them by solving that deprivation. So, for example, you'll have the pro-life movement in America, which doesn't like that people kill babies. Okay? If abortions came down to zero, not many people would show up for the March for Life anymore because you may have accomplished what you were looking for. Now, it doesn't mean those pro-life marchers wouldn't create a new march around something else, but if you could see things getting better, you tend not to protest. If you're protesting the coronavirus right now because you're losing your job, well, if the coronavirus quarantines end, there's nothing to protest. If you're allowed to go back to work, there's nothing to protest, so then it dies out. Some social movements last forever. Some last a month or two. Okay. Cyclical theory. It's the idea that culture runs on cycles or in circles. That whole idea that history repeats itself. There's an idea that maybe you have liberal leaders, which create conservative leaders, which create liberal leaders, which create conservative leaders. Go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. There's an old idea that came from the Dark Ages that hard times, the beginning of history, create strong people that create societies. They create great societies like Rome. And Rome created people who got lazy and realized, hey, Rome's awesome. I don't have to do anything because, you know what, Rome's been here for a couple hundred years. It's going to be here forever. And then the weak men that run a country could let it die because they don't have the fortitude or the will to keep things going. And then those hard times create people that help to fix things, which creates great societies. And along and along and along and along we go till the end of time. Okay. Some people see patterns, like a change in leadership occurs after times of stress. So you can see something like a Barack Obama being very, very young compared to some of his Republican opponents. And you'll get times too where Great Depression created different monsters like Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, people like that. So you can find a lot of things in history where, okay, maybe there's a really bad recession. We got to be careful that no dictator comes out of this and takes advantage of all these people. Okay. Evolutionary theory. It's the idea that we're on this big path all the way to our modern age. There is some points to this, but some of it can be bad too. It's looking back at history to prove the present in a weird way. So you're getting to the point where, oh, I see that we have a lot of democracy in this country, and democracy won, so that means that all of history is a slow march to democracy. Doesn't technically mean that, because we are just a certain point in history. There will still be plenty of history after we're gone. Some people look at it in that way, so they might say, oh yeah, we're going to have even more capitalism. Well, capitalism is not nearly as rampant as it was in the early 1900s where there weren't as many rules. Now there's a lot more rules and stuff like that, so you never know. One of my favorite ones to look at, and this is something definitely if you're a history type person, might say that the Allies won World War II because they had a more just society than the Nazis. It was better for a lot more people, and thus what the people in the Nazi Empire didn't have any reason to fight for them because the Polish people didn't want them there. But the people who were in the American or the British areas were fine. However, the Americans had lynchings and racism that was still extremely horrible for another 20 to 30 years after World War II. And the British stole grain and crops from India to feed its soldiers and possibly killed a couple million people in India. So it doesn't mean that it's always the best people that win. It's just they might technically be better than the others. We look at the same thing as the North in the Civil War. The North was incredibly racist. Just wasn't nearly as racist as the South. And then you can look also at like the Cold War and say like capitalism is so much better, and that's why it won. well, you don't know whether communism is bad, which it is, but but some people would argue communism isn't bad because it hasn't been successfully used. Which, okay, but who knows? And I think that's about it. And thanks for the great year. Hope you have a great time in this crazy summer, but I don't know. Hope to see you again someday.